John Fetterman is not the progressive politician everyone thought he was. And we already heard about him maybe a week or two ago, saying that the situation at the southern US border is dire. I'm pretty sure that's roughly what he said. But now it seems like there may be more. So I guess spurred on by that event, people have been looking into it more, and this is what Epoch Times has found. Financial backing from progressive Democrats helped John Fetterman flip a long-held Republican U.S. Senate seat in Pennsylvania in 2022. During his first 2 years as a senator, Mr. Fetterman has often surprised progressives and conservatives alike with his outspoken positions that have challenged party dogma. Mr. Fetterman has voted against his party 5 times. He was the only Democrat to vote no on the confirmation of Monica Bertagnolli to direct the National Institutes of Health. He was one of 4 Democrats who voted no to increase the debt ceiling, and he agreed with Republicans on a resolution to disapprove of a rule written by the Department of Commerce relating to President Joe Biden's June 2022 emergency and authorization for temporary extensions of time and duty-free importation of solar cells and modules from Southeast Asia. Well, okay, if you're gonna name bills, there's 2 ways that people name political bills in the US. 1, the Puppies and Kittens Act. 2, 6 paragraphs for a single name, apparently. The guy on the Senate floor in the Carhat hoodie is still very much a Democrat, pro-abortion, pro-recreational marijuana, pro-criminal justice reform, and a strong supporter of unions. Interesting. At the US Capitol, Mr. Fetterman told the Epoch Times that he has not changed positions, but things are happening that highlight them, most notably his support for Israel and acknowledging the problem of illegal crossings at the southern border. He says, sometimes people may have the wrong impressions, whether from the commercials and all that stuff. Mr. Fetterman said, I've always really had those kinds of positions, so it's not like a shock, so nothing's changed, perhaps maybe the perception. So it's odd. It may be that he's not a establishment hack, that he is just mostly Democrat, but they would have preferred him to the alternative. It's interesting. He's trying to be the next cinema / mansion, maybe. So I won't go too much into this, but it looks like, yeah, he's not exactly the bland nothing clone that he that we assumed that he would be. Then again, I mean, he was already an ogre. We knew that much about him. We have another story here from Fetterman about Trump. Fetterman reveals Trump still strong in Pennsylvania. Quote, Trump signs everywhere. Senator John Fetterman stated that former President Donald Trump still enjoys significant support in Pennsylvania, adding that he sees Trump signs everywhere. The thing is, Fetterman, that there is significant reason to believe that Pennsylvania was one of the main states that was. I believe that the assessment from Trump's lawyer back in 2020 was that somewhere between 600,000 and possibly over 1 million ballots were affected by election fraud or general fraud in Pennsylvania. And that was the biggest one, that Trump was actually winning there by a lot, and that's where they had to focus a great deal of their effort. In an interview with the New York Times, Mr. Fetterman was asked about the former president's indictment and whether there would be political fallout in the Keystone State among his supporters. Yeah, so I don't know the full details, but the Keystone State, I assume that's referring to the Keystone XL pipeline that Trump was building, which Biden immediately shut down. And the Keystone pipeline was, I expect, it was like 60,000 jobs or something. It was a massive benefit to Pennsylvania. And so that's probably why they had to rig there so hard, because Trump probably actually significantly won that state. It may have been one of his strongest states if they just left him alone. Quote, it doesn't matter. I'm a senator and I'm not sure how many times he's been indicted. He's been impeached twice. Has that changed anything? You're still seeing Trump signs everywhere in Pennsylvania. You have to respect his strength in all of that. So that's good from Fetterman. The first-time Democratic senator told the paper. That's actually, for a Democrat, that's a very good statement. And as you say, maybe he's doing it deliberately, but he may not be. Some cities in Pennsylvania actually had over 100% registered voter turnout, 114% at one point. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Matthias says it's called the Keystone State because Pennsylvania acts as basically the unifying factor between the North and the South. Okay, interesting. Mr. Fetterman predicted that Mr. Trump would be competitive in Pennsylvania in the next election. However, he suggested that the former president would have to outperform in 2024 as compared with 2020 or 2016. That may be true, that he may have to, but I expect he can. He's even more popular this time, and Biden's even less popular this time. But all it would take is for there to be less, and Trump would still do really well there. Quote, Trump would be very competitive in Pennsylvania, but Trump has to perform above his ceiling. I think there's a hard ceiling in Pennsylvania he can't get past, he suggested, without elaborating. Mr. Fetterman delivered those remarks after the former president was indicted for a second time by the Department of Justice for allegedly mishandling classified documents. His comments come after a Quinnipiac University poll estimated that Mr. Trump and President Joe Biden are neck and neck in Pennsylvania. Mr. Trump won Pennsylvania's elections in 2016, while Mr. Biden was declared the victor in 2020 amid allegations of election fraud. Thank you, Epoch Times. That is not only successfully neutral, but is, I mean, it's not quite neutral. It's a little biased in our favor, but it's not too bad. But it's also correct. Like, compared to the bias of the mainstream media, where they would say Biden won in 2020, and even though Trump made false accusations of election, which is complete nonsense, at least what they've written here, the person that wrote it probably knew, but they have deliberately written it in a much more neutral way than they feel is the truth, which, you know, you could argue that they should write just what is true. They should be pundits. But I think there's a lot to be said for maintaining the appearance of objectivity, maintaining the journalistic integrity to, how would I word it exactly? It's not up to the press to shape public opinion. Even if they had the opportunity to write something that's true, they should try to remain neutral and let the public decide on their own. Give the information, give the facts. Sure, give the facts. And they do here, but you know, and amid allegations, they could have just not mentioned it. So it is still biased to mention that fact there. But yeah, anyway, it's minor anyway. The poll released in late June showed that in a hypothetical match between Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden, the former Republican president is ahead by 1 percentage point. About 94% of Democratic voters back Mr. Biden, while 89% of Republicans back Mr. Trump. About 51% of independents back Mr. Trump and 37% back Mr. Biden. Well, it's interesting. That's one of the first polls I've seen that positively confirms that independents are more in favor of Trump than of Biden. And that's pretty important. Reporting, not propaganda, indeed. I mean, like, even if you do think that this statement here was biased, the way that the mainstream press is biased is so comprehensive, so subversive, and so vicious that there's no even possible comparison. Epoch Times is, in my opinion, the most neutral without being wrong. It's actually, I would say Epoch Times is my favorite news source these days. I do tend to use it. But then on the other end of the not wrong, but also biased is Gateway Pundit. But of course, I've said before, Gateway Pundit is one that I use, not because they're not biased. It does bother me sometimes, the bias. They are pundits, of course, like me, so they're allowed to be. But I use it because they will sometimes cover stories that no one else will, not even Epoch Times. Things that are maybe a bit daring, a bit out there, a bit more dubious, but we can judge that ourselves. Yeah, apparently Trump is still far ahead of other GOP candidates by a wide margin.